I used to think the hearth was sacred. That fire, crackling beneath a cast iron pot, was what held the soul of our home together, until the night I saw what else it was capable of keeping warm. My name is Kiran. I live, or lived, in a small wooden house perched on the slope of a Himalayan valley, where mist blankets the morning and stars blanket the night. We do not have cities here, just villages where family is law, and tradition is the only truth. Our house was built by my grandfather, a place of thick beams, low doorways, and memories tucked into every crack in the timber. I grew up herding goats, mending roofs, gathering herbs with my mother. I never thought of leaving, not once. Home wasn't just a place, it was a lineage. When I married, it was a quiet ceremony. My wife, Anaya, was brought from a neighboring district. She was younger than me, soft-spoken, and dutiful. She spoke with a melody in her voice that made even the silence of our home feel full. I did not ask for much. I only wished to be a good husband, a good son, and a brother that others could rely on. And they did rely on me. My brother and his wife, Meera, lived with us. Meera was the stronger one, both in voice and presence. She helped manage the household and often acted as a bridge between the younger and older generations. She had a way of making you believe she understood everything, and that it was safe to place your trust in her. For a time, everything seemed right. Days passed in rhythm, tending to animals, fixing fences, meals cooked over open flame, stories whispered in the night air. But slowly, something shifted. Anaya began retreating into herself. At first I thought it was the cold. Winters are cruel here, and loneliness can feel sharper than frost. But she started avoiding my gaze, going to bed before the rest of us, claiming headaches, then silence. Meera noticed, or perhaps she already knew. She needs time, Meera told me one evening, as we shelled peas beside the hearth. Marriage isn't always simple for women. Give her space, be patient. I nodded. I always nodded, because I believed Meera. She had been like a sister to me for years. She defended Anaya's quietness, soothed my insecurities. She had this way of looking into your eyes and making you feel like she carried your burden with you. Then came the first strange moment. One night, I woke to find the bed cold beside me. I walked softly through the corridor, the wooden floor creaking like an old song. As I passed the hallway that led to the women's quarters, I saw a shadow, Meera, slipping out of Anaya's room. She didn't see me, or maybe she did. Her steps didn't quicken. I stood there for a full minute. I didn't go in, I didn't knock, I turned back, convinced myself it was nothing. Perhaps she had brought Anaya tea. Perhaps she had just been checking on her. What kind of man suspects his own family? The next day, things were as normal as ever. Anaya made lentil soup. Meera chopped firewood. No one looked at me oddly. Yet everything inside me had twisted. I couldn't name what I was afraid of. Only that it didn't belong in our house. In our customs. In our name. In the weeks that followed, I told myself it was in my head. I spent more time in the high pastures, with the goats and the wind, both more honest than the silence at home. But still, every night as I approached the house, I looked at the windows. Were the curtains drawn? Was the light from the hearth dancing too brightly? My mother began asking why Anaya didn't join the women for prayers. My father, blind in one eye but sharp as ever, once asked me, "What's keeping you up these nights? Boy, I hear you pacing." I told them nothing, because there was nothing I could prove. And in our culture, nothing is everything. To accuse without evidence is to disgrace. To doubt without words is to fall from grace. So I smiled, and nodded, and swallowed my questions like ash. One evening, as fog settled over the valley and the moon hung low like a secret, I sat on the porch with Meera. She handed me warm milk, the way she used to when I was a teenager. "You seem tired," she said, her voice gentle, eyes unreadable. "The animals keep me busy," I replied. She looked out into the mist, then said, "You know, not everything that changes is wrong. Sometimes, it's just different." I didn't answer. I watched her sip her milk, the steam curling around her face like incense. And I wondered, who was Meera? Really? Was she still my sister-in-law? Or had something shifted beneath the floorboards of this house, subtle as smoke, and I had been too naive to notice? I began to dread the nights. The warmth of the hearth, once my comfort, now seemed to mock me. Every creak in the floor, every laugh between the two women, every shared glance, I catalogued them like a man keeping track of ghosts. Yet I said nothing, because the silence of a house like mine is louder than any scream. And still, I hoped that I was wrong. I hoped that love would return to my wife's eyes. I hoped that Mira was still the woman who once stayed up all night tending to me when I had fever. But in the pit of my stomach, I felt it, that something sacred had cracked, and all it would take was one gust of wind through the open window. One unguarded moment by the hearth, for it all to come crumbling down. And it would, sooner than I thought. The snow had fallen heavier than usual that night, burying the village in a muffled stillness. It was the kind of cold that got into your bones, the kind that made even the dogs curl tighter into themselves. I awoke not because of the chill, but from thirst, a dry throat and a mouth that tasted like smoke. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and stepped quietly out of bed, careful not to wake my father in the next room. The house creaked beneath my feet. The wooden floor, worn smooth by generations, groaned like it was remembering something it didn't want to. The kitchen was just past the hallway, where the hearth fire never quite went out. It was always warm there, a pocket of heat in the center of our frigid home. As I approached, I heard it, not just the soft roar of fire, but voices. Not voices, exactly. A laugh, a low, intimate laugh. And then, silence. I froze. My hand hovered near the kitchen door. The laugh wasn't loud, but it wasn't meant to be. It was a sound shared between people who thought they were alone. I stepped closer, barefoot on the cold wood. Through the sliver of space between the door and its frame, I saw them, Anaya and Mira. They were sitting near the hearth, the firelight dancing across their faces. Anaya was curled beneath Mira's arm, head resting on her shoulder. Mira's fingers moved slowly through her hair, as if memorizing it. Neither of them spoke. They just sat there, bathed in the glow of something I hadn't been allowed to see. I didn't breathe. My chest tightened, and not just from the cold. The world in front of me blurred, as if the snow outside had crept into my vision. I stepped back, quietly, blindly. I returned to my room. My hands trembled as I pulled the shawl tighter around me. My throat, once dry with thirst, was now clenched with a different ache. Sleep didn't come. At dawn, I moved through the house like a ghost. I helped my father with his morning tea, nodded at my mother when she mentioned temple offerings, and avoided the kitchen altogether. Anaya didn't meet my eyes at breakfast. Mira did. Her gaze was steady, unashamed. It didn't challenge me, but it didn't shrink either. I left before anyone could ask questions. The high pastures were safer, up there. The goats didn't lie. The snow was honest. It covered everything. Yes, but it never pretended. I sat on a rock, staring down at the valley. My mind returned to what I saw, over and over, like a song with no refrain. What were they? Was it love? Was it betrayal? Was it both? And more painfully, had it always been this way? Or had I simply failed to see it? The cold wind bit at my face. But I welcomed it. Pain reminded me I was still alive, that I could still feel, even when it felt like too much. When I returned that evening, the hearth was lit again. Anaya was stirring lentils. Mira sat nearby, sewing a tear in one of my father's shawls. Their movements were calm, practiced. No evidence of the night before lingered. "You're late," Mira said without looking up. The snow slowed me. I answered. Anaya didn't speak. We ate in silence. My father complained about a loose window latch. My mother told me to take more rice. Mira smiled. Anaya picked at her food. That night, I lay awake long after the house had gone quiet. I thought about speaking, about confronting, about asking, even pleading. But how does one ask such a question in a house built on silence? How do you scream into a culture that rewards you for swallowing every cry? I said nothing, because if I said it out loud, It would become real, and I wasn't ready for real. Not yet. But I knew what I saw. And that knowledge became a wedge in my heart, small now, but growing. It would split me open. Soon. I didn't scream, I didn't strike, I didn't even raise my voice. I simply asked, why her, of all people, why Mira? The question didn't hang in the air. It sank like a stone into a still lake, breaking the silence but leaving no ripples. Anaya stood in the center of the room, her hands clasped in front of her, her shawl slipping slightly from one shoulder. She looked at me, not with fear, not with guilt, but with an unbearable calm. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She did not deny it. She didn't even try. From behind her, Mira stepped forward, tears already on her cheeks. She reached for words like someone reaching into a river for something long lost. It wasn't supposed to happen, she said, her voice trembling. It was never meant to. But once it did, we couldn't go back. I felt the earth shift beneath me. Not from what was said, but from what wasn't, the acceptance in their silence, the absence of apology. My heart wasn't just breaking. It was being hollowed out, scooped clean from the inside. The room blurred, my breath caught somewhere between a gasp and a sob. And still, I did not raise my voice. The kitchen door opened, and my father stood there, cane in hand, having heard enough. Behind him, my mother clutched at her scarf, her face pale, lips trembling. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, my mother screamed. She tore the scarf from her head and threw it onto the ground. Shaking with rage, my father brought the cane down against the floorboards with a crack that echoed through the house. And just like that, it was over. No accusations, no exile, no confessions, just silence. Later that night, I sat with them by the fire. My mother's eyes were red from crying. My father's hands trembled as he held his tea. I asked them what we would do. My mother shook her head. You will say nothing. Nothing, I asked. My voice cracked. You want me to live here? With this? Pretend it never happened? My father didn't look at me. The village does not need to know. It will shame the family. The name, her name, yours. But it happened. You know it did. And now it must end. He said, quietly. Their answer wasn't cruel. It was weary. It came from generations of rules passed down like heirlooms. You suffer. You endure. You do not disgrace the family. But I was done enduring. That night, I packed my things. Not much. A blanket, my coat, a satchel with dried fruit and bread. I wrapped it all tight and stepped into the snow without a word. No one tried to stop me. The door didn't creak. The fire didn't snap. The only sound was the crunch of my boots against the frozen path leading away from the only life I had known. I didn't cry. Not when I passed the shrine. Not when I reached the edge of the forest. Not even when the mountain wind sliced across my face. I had no tears left. I had buried them in the kitchen, beneath the glow of the fire where the truth had finally shown itself. What I carried with me wasn't just heartbreak. It was the silence of a family that chose shame over honesty. The silence of a culture that told me to be still, to swallow pain like medicine. I walked through that silence, into the dark, and I didn't look back. They told me to forget, to move on, to rebuild, but every night, as the fire hissed in the hearth of my borrowed cabin, I heard echoes of another flame, the one back home, the one in the kitchen, the one that burned away my life. There are no neighbors here, no children running past, no prayer bells ringing at dawn, only trees, snow, and silence, and me, Kiran, or whatever was left of him. I settled in a remote village on the other side of the mountain, where the dialect was unfamiliar and the winters harsher. The locals didn't ask questions. They saw my worn hands, my quiet eyes, and gave me space. I worked as a porter in the forest. Hauled wood, mended roofs, shoveled paths. Each task was penance. Every day, a distraction. No one here knew the story. Or if they did, they had the decency not to speak it. That was enough. Months passed, maybe years. Time here did not move forward. It folded in on itself. My days were the same length as my nights, both measured by the weight of memory. Occasionally, I heard rumors carried by other travelers. Whispers from the old village. Mira left. Anaya fell ill. My mother stopped speaking for weeks. My father refused to light the kitchen fire. None of it brought me back. Until one day, in the white hush of early winter, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to Snowlight and a figure wrapped in a dark shawl. Her face was leaner, her eyes sunken, but I knew Mira. She didn't speak at first. Just stood, shivering, waiting for me to move aside. I didn't. She spoke in a whisper, her voice brittle as the ice on the eaves. "I'm not here to beg. I'm not here to return." I said nothing. She continued, "I came because I needed to tell you what I felt. It was never meant to be yours to carry. I broke something sacred, I know that, but I loved you, Kiran, in the wrong way, at the wrong time, but it wasn't false." The snow swirled behind her like spirits listening. I felt the burn rise in my chest again. Not rage, not even grief, just the deep ache of something irreparably changed. She reached into her shawl and handed me something. It was a small wooden carving. A prayer figure, the kind I used to whittle for the children in our village. She had kept it, all this time. I took it, more from reflex than intent. "I have to go," she said, stepping back. I didn't stop her, I didn't speak. She walked away, her footprints disappearing almost instantly under the falling snow. I stood there for a long time. Then I turned and placed the carving on the small shelf above the fire. Next to it, I placed something else, the red woolen scarf Anaya had knit me the winter we married. I hadn't touched it in years. But I hadn't thrown it away, either. That night, I sat by the fire and listened. Not to the wind, not to the forest, to the quiet inside myself. The ghosts of the kitchen no longer shouted. They whispered. They did not vanish, they never would, but they no longer held me captive. I had not forgiven, but I had let go. And in the silence that followed, I breathed, truly breathed. Outside, snow fell like ash over a world that had burned and kept on turning. And in my hand, the scarf trembled slightly in the draft, like a heart learning to beat again.